Hello and welcome back to another episode of From the Field. I just have to make sure I'm not, yeah, I'm definitely not muted. I've done that a couple of times and that's always been a bit embarrassing. So today we have a Consegna here as a special guest. They're turning into a bit of a regular show over the cadence, and they're here to talk about the migration acceleration program that AWS provides through partners, and how they can actually help businesses accelerate their journey to the cloud. But before we jump into that, a little, story. I have a very eventful life, apparently, for someone that never leaves the house. So if the power goes out and I suddenly disappear, that's because they decided to unhook my mains power because they happened to replace it for fire hazard reasons. So it's not because I just decided to up and leave. It's because I probably have to jump my hotspot and then rejoin. So, with all of that out of the way, I just wanted to go on about the fact that and I will talk about this again at the end of the stream, where we are running AWS Cloud Days for .NET developers. This is I think the start of us returning to a few more in-person events. So these are in-person events. It's going to cover the .NET on AWS, and there is an event in Auckland on the 26th, Christchurch on the 27th, and Wellington on the 28th. So that's going to be fun for flights. I'm going to be at the very top of the country, all the way at the bottom, then in the middle. And I will actually be presenting here as well. I'm actually in charge of presenting this very first presentation here, and there will also be workshops. So if this is if you work in .NET and this seems like something that you'd be interested in, it is free. All you need to do is sign up at this page. I will pop a link. Hopefully this will come through. If not, I'll use my personal email to just go there and just sign up and then turn up, and it'll be an awesome little day for us. So from there, I'm going to I'm also located in Wellington, so we have two offices in New Zealand, one in Auckland, one in Wellington. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We're more than happy. They don't even have to be related to what we're talking about. If you just have anything that you want to explore or talk about, we have lots of very talented people on the stream at the moment. Presenting, so definitely utilize us, and don't be shy. So I'm going to hand over to Nitin and the team to introduce themselves and kick this off.
Thank you, Casey. I'm Nitin Yadav, Head of Cloud Enablement at Consegna. Over to you, James.
Hey, my name is James Windsor. I'm the Head of Sales for Australia and New Zealand for Consegna.
And hey, I'm Tom Kangora from Consegna on Cloud Technical Pre-Sales. So I think, Casey,
Tom,
do you want to share the... Yeah. So I think sharing, if you just want to flip over, here we go.
All right.
So I think we can probably skip this one here.
So team, today we're going to be talking... Sorry, I'll just kick it off there. We're going to be talking about the AWS Migration Acceleration Program, which is a program that AWS has built and evolved for customers that have committed to migrate at scale to the cloud. And I guess the first point is why is that important? Why should you care about that as a technical person? And the reason you should care is because if you're working for a company and you want to do some of the cool stuff like building serverless applications or modernizing your data architecture or implementing AI ML, you need two things. You need resources and you need funding. And you need to get those workloads out of the data center. And so the migration at scale frees up some of that funding. It lets people focus on some of the cool stuff. And it also gets the workloads into a place where you can really innovate and then iterate on those applications. So what we're going to talk about are the drivers for migration, what the Migration Acceleration Program is, and then we'll go into some use cases and examples, some of the tooling that we use. We won't really talk a lot about Consegna, but if anybody wants to know, you can follow up with us after the call.
I also jump in there and say that another great benefit is that you will start learning cloud and building up that cloud muscle, and those cloud skill sets are in massive demand. And I'll talk about that more at the end of the stream as well, about how you can actually start polishing and improving those skills.
All right, so what are the drivers for migration and transformation? You can read the slide. When I look at this, on the right hand of the slide are things that I refer to as table stakes. So obviously you want to be able to scale, you want to be secure. A lot of customers come into migration because they want to reduce cost. But the real reason that you do transformation comes down to data and applications. It's what can you do after you migrate that you can't do today that's going to move the needle for your customers, that's going to make it easier for them to engage with you and make it more compelling for them to do business with you. You may want to get into new areas like IoT, AI, ML. You may want to transform your data, your approach to data, so that you're collecting new data sources and using that data in new and innovative ways. And you want to modernize your application estate. So those are the real reasons why customers get involved in transformation from the start. But all the stuff on the right side is really critical to make sure you do correctly as you go through that journey. Anything to add there, Tom and Nitin?
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, customers, they may start off with different drivers, like they want to increase their staff productivity, or they want to decrease time to market for their end customers. So all of these things combined, and how do we actually go on this journey? This is where the Migration Acceleration Program comes in. And yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, just echoing what James and Nitin were saying there. I think we'll talk about it a little bit further in the slides. But one of the key things I really like about the Migration Acceleration Program is it's a mature process, and they understand that you know, once you've migrated workloads to the cloud, that's just the beginning. That's when the transformation starts to begin. You can start to add value back to the business. So there's some key levers and mechanisms within the program to help customers really take advantage of that.
And feel free anytime if you want to type your questions into the comments box on the right. We can take your comments and your questions as they come through. So just to give you a quick overview of what the Migration Acceleration Program is. So a lot of people, when they think about MAP, they think about funding, because AWS does have a bucket of funding that they offer to customers to help enable them to go on a journey at scale. But the Migration Acceleration Program, for me, the real value in the program goes well beyond the funding. It's really about the cumulative experience of AWS across thousands of migrations with and without partners, and building methodologies, integrating tools, enabling partners, skilling up partners, building programs of training for customers, and helping customers to understand what training they should give to their internal teams, and then also combining that with the skill sets of AWS ProServe, bringing all that together into a very structured program that helps to accelerate and de-risk and fund those migrations for customers. Do you have some examples, maybe, Nitin, that you can give where Consegna has leveraged this program to kind of make it real?
Yeah, absolutely. So quite often when we talk to the customers about migrations, they know they want to move to cloud. They know they've got workloads that they need to architect. But what they're not sure of is, how do they get started? What's the first step in the process? And AWS was getting this constant feedback early on in the days from their customers. How do I actually get onto the platform? How do I have this big organization? For example, one of the big telco in New Zealand that we work with, they wanted to move to cloud, but they have several business units, and all of those business units have separate requirements, different workloads. They have tooling in place that they use for their product team. They were really confused on where to get started. Do they pick BU number 1, or do they pick BU number 2? How do they actually structure the migration in a way where it's efficient to move stuff and you know, without having to cause too much chaos in the process? Dealing within a big organization can always be challenging, and this is where the beauty of this program comes in. It's got a structured framework in place. It gives you the right tools and techniques to leverage at each step. And we're going to go into a little bit more details into what those tools and techniques are and what those phases are that makes up the MAP program. Okay, yeah. And so typical MAP program is divided into these 3 phases, right? And the phase on the left is where a customer would typically start. The whole idea behind the assess phase is to capture data. Without data, you're flying blind. And this data really comes down to business and technical level. We drop in tools that we will cover in the next slide to gain insights into your workloads that you've got running on-prem, or could be another cloud provider, or whatever their workload is. And we abstract that information into another tooling, do some analysis, come up with total cost of ownership. For example, the recent migration that we did, the starting point was to actually capture that data quickly, and a little bit of insight into what tool do we use. And in the example of the big telco, we really needed to get detailed information out of their environments. And by detailed information, I mean the application dependency metrics, which workload is talking to what component. It could be within their data centers, it could be to external SaaS providers. So taking all of those factors into consideration, using all of that data, we can then create a business case that we can present back to the business owners or the key stakeholders. Throughout this process, we also get buy-in from all of these business units that I was talking to earlier. They all feel part of the process. It's not a big surprise when this exercise comes their way. And typically, there's a single-threaded leader that would get appointed in the process that will oversee the whole program. Any notes
Listen,
there?
just to jump in as well, like the assess phase is really important for all of the factors that are outlined, but also commonly, no matter how big or small your environment, there's always going to be random servers that sit there. And you're like, what does the server do? Like, why does it exist? And then you go around and talk to everyone that works there, like pretty much it should know what it does. And they'll come back with, I don't know. Like, why does it exist? Like, and then you're like, well, does it have any workloads on it? Like, does the CPU work? Does there any network going to it? And it's a real eye-opening experience there, and it allows you to identify possible servers that have just actually been sitting there taking up your own prem, like like VMs, like just sitting there because it's got lost in the bureaucracy of the overall company. And then like as we all know, we're scared to turn things off, and we have the whole thing in infrastructure and IT where you just stop the instance and you see who starts screaming, and you're like, oh, okay, that was actually required. And you quickly turn it back on and hope it didn't bring down the whole of the company. So yeah, it's a very, very important part of the process, because without that, like, yeah, there could be one critical server out there that no one knows about, or like one database, like one Microsoft Access database sitting on a server that actually for some reason runs payroll. So yeah, I've seen lots of very interesting things come with this, and also a lot of business leaders and IT leaders that get very surprised by what shakes out as well.
Absolutely.
That's a very good point.
One of the things that I also find really interesting about the assess phase is that often customers will come to us and say, hey, we have this many servers, we have this many data centers, we have the following applications, but the tooling that we use has been tested and proven across many migrations. And so it really collects the right data to start planning for the business case and planning for the migration itself. And it helps if you've been involved in a previous migration exercise where you thought, maybe the business case didn't stack up. Often we can anticipate some of those things and help you with different approaches based on the data that we collect to maybe make the business case work for you and make it easier for you to get it over the line and start working towards some of the fruits of that modernization and migration later down the road.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this program. We can pick and choose the activities when we want to do them. They're not sequential, but the first assess phase essentially gives you a backlog of things to do in the next phase. So mobilize is where rubber hits the road, really. You start to get into deeper level planning on how you're going to do this thing. If there is a requirement to create a detailed business case, we can tackle that here. But it usually starts from the AWS foundational layer. It usually starts out with a control tower or a landing zone deployment. And this is where we work with security. They might have different segregations they want to put in. into the AWS environments. There might be a category of workload that would need to live in a separate environment. So taking all of those considerations, we design the control tower landing zone for their particular customers. And they might have requirements around deploying firewalls. The solution could be AWS network firewall, or it could be a third-party vendor firewall that we need to deploy into AWS. So we work with different teams in this space, and how do we bake monitoring into it? And James is going to talk about the operating model, and that will sort of lead into that in a bit. But after that, you build a landing zone, you need to test it out. We take it for a spin, and how do we do that? We pick typically 2 to 5 workloads, and they vary in complexity. One of them could be very simple lift and shift type move. The other one may need a little bit of re-architect. If there's a use case and the code is handled by the teams in-house, they can tweak the application to use an S3 bucket instead of a file share on-prem. And that's a big win for the customer. And we've done that in the past. It's quick change. Your applications become slightly decoupled. And in the next iteration, you can start to decouple more and more. So doing all of that, and what I'm leading to is the 6R or the 7R analysis. 7th is the VMC on AWS. 6R analysis, retire, rehost, replatform, all of that. And the data that we've gotten in the discovery phase is put to use here. You've got your workloads automatically curated by the tooling that we've put in. It could be Flexera, it could be Migration Evaluator, TSO Logic, or whatever. Against those workloads, and we do sit down with customers like, what does that workload do? I don't know. And is it actually required? The good old scream test case he was talking about. We turn it off if nobody screams. We exclude it from the migration plan if it's safe to do so. Then taking it back to those 2 to 3 or 5 workloads, one of them could be just re-platforming, moving your MS SQL database from your on-prem servers to RDS, for example. That's a good example of that, our strategy. With this migration 2 to 3 workload that we've migrated into AWS, we've gained experience on how we're actually going to execute it on a larger scale. And we've also proven out the landing zone throughout the process. Throughout this process, we've also worked with different teams within the business. For example, we had one customer and they have a product team. They're really good in AWS. They really know what they're doing. They've got CI/CD pipelines in place. They deploy based on their Git commits. Deployments are semi-automated. So there's that maturity, but it only exists within that team. And we try to work with those teams, and they become the champions of for that particular business. And they help to spread the skills and knowledge to other team members or other people in another team, perhaps. There might be traditional sysadmins and system engineers. They're used to certain ways, and taking them on a journey is quite important as well. We help customers put a training plan in place. How do we actually upskill these people? And we work with our customers to uplift that capability. We have a famous saying at Consegna, we like to do cloud with you, not to you. So every time we create any sort of automation, any piece of code, it gets pushed into the customer's repository. You retain all the IPs that we create, and you have full control over the process, and you can bring in new team members as we go. So sort of want to take a pause here. I've been talking quite a lot. Hand back to James or Tom, if you had any comments.
Just a couple of points there, and Nitin raises some really good points. We talked about turning off individual virtual machines and seeing who screams or applications. And I think one of the key parts we find with customers when we're running through an assess phase is, we want to make sure that you're not inheriting or migrating any of the sins of the past that happen on premise, and they all happen. People put 64 gig against a virtual machine just because they can. But as part of that, we'll make sure that we're right-sizing the instances, mapping the application dependencies to ensure we can see the network flow between them to be able to then go into migration planning. And so something I thought was a really good point you raised in there, Nitin, as well, which we see quite often, is it's not just about the technical change, it's about the cultural change. It's a really big change from having your network team, having your SAN team, having the hardware team on premise. And it's about taking them on that journey, upskilling them, and making sure that everybody feels part of that center of excellence, because it's a cross-functional team across the entire business. Really good points, Nitin.
Yeah, that training piece is really critical. That's a great point. And one of the things that we help customers to do is to do a learning needs assessment. So if you think about the 7 R's treatment that you build during this mobilize phase, you're then saying, okay, here's what my estate's going to look like post-migration, at least in the short to medium term. What skills do I need to build? What operating models do I need to put in place? So say, for example, we had a customer that I worked with in the past, decided that they were going to move part of their workloads into AWS native and part of their workloads into VMware Cloud on AWS. So 2 different operating models there. And even within the native environment, you might be building a DevOps capability where you have people that are rapidly iterating on applications, but you might also in your native environment have COTS applications where you're not doing that. And you might actually have 2 separate operating models for that. So you need to think that through at the beginning so that you make sure you're building the right skills in your own internal team and then putting the other operating models in place so that it goes very, very smoothly. And then over time, as you modernize your estate, you may be able to divest yourself from some of those operating models and simplify down to, say, just a pure DevOps model in the end.
I just want to give out another.
Again. So on the 25th of August, I have locked in a AWS migration specialist. This is pretty much the guy that knows everything around migrations. We rope him into a lot of things, where he's going to do a deep dive on the migration tooling. It is a wee while in the future, but it's pretty hard to narrow down this time. So yeah, on the 25th of November, we will be going into like a pretty deep dive around the migration services that AWS offer and how, a lot of this migrate phase, tooling that works around it.
Thanks, Casey. Yeah, another example I wanted to give here is we had a customer and they had really tight time frame to move from their Azure environment to AWS. They were using Azure Kubernetes for their platform, and they had all sorts of performance problems with the Redis cluster, and they've decided to move to AWS. By the quick time frame, the quick turnaround was because they were seeking funding. They're a startup. They're seeking funding from various sources. They needed to prove out the capability that they can actually do this migration quickly, and that's where we came in. We helped them out, put a quick plan in place, had a spike, figured out what we need to do, how are we going to move their storage component from Azure Blob Store to S3. We worked with the developers to make the code change to talk to S3, identifying what sort of cluster size we're going to put into Redis in AWS. What does the EKS configuration look like? And quickly spun up the clusters, prove out the capability. Yep, you can move the dev cluster. And it only took us 2 weeks to do that. And that was quite impressive. Working with our customers, we had the dev teams on board, and it was quite a joyful experience as well. So yeah, all of these things are possible because of this framework that we've got in place. And yeah, of course, we leverage the funding model from AWS as well. So the next phase on the right-hand side is the migrate and modernize. This is where we sit down and start to plan the bigger migration waves. We group workloads into a category, and all of these workloads can be part in migration wave 1, for example, wave 2, wave 3, and so on. We also sit down and refine the operating model. What does day 1 operations look like in AWS? We sit down and work with the teams who will actually be operating this environment, this new AWS landscape, and identify candidates for modernization. I talked about the re-architecture example. This is where we can create an epic for a particular workload and set out the plan for that. How do you decouple of particular solutions? There's event-driven architectures, many examples, many patterns available to us that we can leverage, or is it just a re-platform exercise? We could also look at further resizing the workloads. Quite a lot of resizing is also done in the mobilized phase. When we abstract data from for on-prem systems, the tooling will often recommend, hey, this is what your usage looks like for last 21 days or however long the tooling ran and collected the data for. And it will provide a recommendation for that instance size. And this is where we apply that recommendation and see how the workload behaves. If we need to make further adjustments, we can do that here as well. That's sort of the overview of the three phases.
I wanted to just cover off a question that came through. The Chihuahua essentially asked about where can they get this training for free. It also happens to work at Amazon Excel, so that's always exciting to see a fellow Amazonian. Yeah, so towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk about a lot of the free training mechanisms we have. Also, feel free to reach out to me over LinkedIn. And then we can have a chat there as well, a little bit more in person about that. But yeah, there's a lot of free training material out there for the cloud that is quite accessible and very, very well, has a very good learning path set out for it.
Okay. Yeah, this slide basically gives you an overview of what sort of tooling is available for each stage. You can read the tooling name, but there's a variety of options. And when we work with our customers, we actually help them identify which tool to use. The use case might be simple. If we don't need to collect enriched data such as Flexera, would actually go in and create the application dependencies and does a whole lot of things when you compare it with the migration evaluator solution from AWS. But if it's a small environment, we just need to identify what are my servers, what sort of workloads we've got in there, what are the sizes, and a high-level recommendation for right sizing as well. So this is where Migration Developer is good for that. It's easy to configure and doesn't take a whole lot of input from the customer themselves. And the next phase is sort of taking that data and making sense of it. We've got various tools again at the bottom. The partners provide, and AWS also provides MPA, Migration Portfolio Assessment, and I've used it quite a lot. Typically, data is ingested from these various sources on the left-hand side. They collect the inventory, and you can create application dependencies as well. You upload your databases in there, and the performance that they expect in AWS. MPA will then spread out a business case template that you can use to further refine, and it also makes recommendation on do you want to look at VMC, for example, and what does that pricing look like? Do you want to look at EC2 and RDS options? What does that price look like? So creating these scenarios, and you can have multiple scenarios in MPA, which is quite cool. And that's where it allows you to weigh up the options that are available to you. And we help our customers throughout the process. We do all the heavy lifting for them. And then we work with them like, does it make sense for your business to go down this path? And Tom can probably talk to some of the soft requirements and the business requirements they would have around budgeting, or perhaps they've got a relationship with an existing vendor. They've got a licensing agreement in place. So taking all of those factors into consideration and then proposing the right solution for that the customer. Tom, anything to add there?
Yeah, so Nitin raises a really good point there, and I think quite often with automated tooling, you can get a standardized TCO, which is based on kind of the industry and a vendor will put that in front of you and say, here you go, business case, take it to get signed off. But so some of the things I like about the MAP program in particular, and some of the mechanisms we can leverage off, allow us to really customize that for customers. And some specific examples we've worked on where it's added value is we've had customers who were with a managed service provider who had hardware which was expiring non-sequentially. So they had their software, on-premise software, their licensing was again expiring at different times. And they found it really, really challenging to try and put something in front of the business to say, here's the right time to move. And through the MAP program, we're able to spend some time, deploy some tooling, really understand the financial ramifications of moving, and really help define a solid business case. So it's not just a right-click, push a button, spit out a standardized business recommendation. It's really spending time with you and your business, making sure that business case is watertight.
Yeah, and AWS provides the funding for that first assess phase in a lot of cases. And then in the mobilize phase, they offset the funding. So you get access to the skills through partners, people who have done it before and know how to use these tools, but also you get some help paying for that work to make it easier for you to get started on the journey.
Yep, thanks for that. Yeah, and sort of in the middle, we've got application discovery service from AWS and other various partner tools that will help you identify workloads and group them by their components. And that helps to plan the migration waves in the later stage. This is where you also have control tower and service catalog. If there's a case for that, we talked about landing zone and control tower in the previous slides. I won't go too much detail. I won't cover that again. Yeah, and then we've got the migration tools themselves. How do I actually take this this VM from on-prem and move to AWS? What is my R strategy for this? Am I just looking to do a lift and shift? Cloud Endure can easily do that for us, and it's available out of Migration Hub. It's inbuilt into the AWS console, so you can access all of your migration waves from there. And then you've got, if you want to move data around from on-prem SQL servers, for example, into RDS, this is where the database migration service comes in, and other various components like storage gateway and all of those things can be put to use to come up with a solution. And again, we also need to watch. We didn't talk about the networking in detail, but we also sit down with our customers and identify what sort of networking requirements they have. That's quite critical. Quite often, customers actually don't think about that. Bringing data into AWS is free, but data leaving AWS environment, there's a cost associated to that. And just helping them identify how to design their network structure to get the most from the platform. We use Transit Gateway, for example, and we would propose egress VPC and ingress VPC, so you don't have to have NAT gateways sitting in all of your VPCs, and because there's a per hour NAT gateway, per hour cost associated to the NAT gateways. Again, going too much into technical details there. And yeah, tools like Cloud Health can be in Dynatrace. All of these, they're really good tools. Quite often, for example, one of the customers that we worked with, they had consistent problems with their workloads when they were running on-prem. They had a business case approved, and this particular business owner wanted to capture performance data for the applications pre-migration and post-migration, just to prove it to the business. Because of this migration, we actually provided better service to our customers, and having data to prove that is really good, I think. And this is where all of these tools come in. There's various in the operating model. There's various other security tools available to us as well. How do you operate and maintain the security posture of your AWS environment? So there's tools, AWS Security Hub and Macy, and all of those things will feed into that. There's Dome 9, and I think it's called CloudGuard by Checkpoint now. There's Lacework, and all of those options are available in the far right when you start to operate. So I'm going to take a pause there. Anything to add, guys?
If you do mention an AWS service by name, it's always good to give like a one-liner on what it actually does, because that's one of the things I learned very early on. Not everyone knows AWS services. Actually, I quite often get asked about services in meetings, and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And that leads to a very enlightening 2-hour deep dive after the meeting. Bruno has also asked around about vouchers. Unfortunately, I'm in the APJ region, so I only have vouchers for that work in Australia and New Zealand. If you want or are looking for vouchers that are outside of that geography, then do reach out to the account manager or the SA that is assigned to your account if you in a business that has that uses AWS, because that will be the best and easiest way to get a voucher. Or just ask a streamer that is based in that geography. That's generally the best way to go about it. Cool. Sorry, back to you, Nitin.
Okay.
Sorry, Nitin, did I jump ahead? Did you want to cover off anything else on that last slide?
No, I was just contemplating if I want to cover the Security Hub side of things, because I did talk about Macy and config and all that. So I'll just do a quick explanation of what these services are. Security Hub is basically a central console that ingests data from various other services. Like, I'm going to drop more service names in here. AWS Config basically keeps track of all your resources and all the changes associated with them. And that helps to maintain compliance. So having the ability to track changes across these services and these resources, they get fed into Security Hub. Security Hub has out-of-the-box mechanisms that you can deploy, push a button, and all of a sudden you can see how your AWS landscape stacks up against the CIS benchmark, for example. And it has the ability to enroll accounts from your OUs, and it typically sits in a separate security account. Limited people would have access to it. That's your one-stop shop for all things security, feeding into one central place. You don't need to go log into all of these different accounts one by one to look at all of that data available to you. And it's got hooks into Macy. Macy uses AI and ML to identify malicious activities in your account, and they all get fed into Security Hub again. And depending on what sort of support level you've got, you might have.
So Macy, Macy detects PPI within your S3 buckets. Guard Duty is the one that detects some possible malicious or fraudulent activity in the account.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Sure. No problem.
Cool. With that, I think we can move on to the next one.
All right. Well, just 1 sec. Can we just give a quick shout out to the operate and optimize section there? So AWS management and governance services. So a lot of people don't know that AWS actually has a service called AWS Managed Services, where AWS can actually operate your AWS environment. So think of traditional infrastructure operations like monitoring, patching, backup and restore, incident management. They have that service that you can consume for a percentage uplift essentially on your spend. And that team also helps with the optimization efforts. So in addition to your partners, or maybe if you have enterprise support engaged, they can help to continually look at how you're using resources and to help you to optimize those for cost and performance and find opportunities for you to save money to go spend on other projects.
They have a pretty awesome SLA as well, don't they?
Yeah, it's an enterprise grade SLA. So, and the other really cool thing they do is they use AI to anticipate and automatically remediate problems before they become incidents. And so customers that use AMS sometimes find that they get a drop of 50% or more in major incidents because they're solving the problems before they occur based on how resource use is trending.
Cool. Do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, so we're just, this was just to wrap up final thoughts. We had a couple things we wanted to talk about. One was, it's called MAP 2.0. And so a lot of people ask, well, what's the difference between MAP and MAP 2.0? Basically, the key takeaway here is that AWS is very customer focused. They're always listening to customers and partners, and they've evolved the migration acceleration program over time. And so there are a few changes. There's some changes to the structure of funding. They've made it easier for smaller organizations to access funding in MAP 2.0. They've also changed some of the training that's available to partners, and they've introduced a program for partners called the AWS Migration Black Belt Program for people who want to be able to get trained up and certified to go run their own game days or immersion days with customers around migration. So those are some of the things that have changed over time with MAP, and I'm sure that it will continue to evolve. We also wanted to just talk briefly about VMware Cloud on AWS, because a lot of people overlook it. If you're really a cloud-centric type of person, you might think, well, everything should be modernized, it should all be running in serverless, everything should be containers. The reality is there are going to be a lot of fragile legacy applications out there when you're doing a mass migration that you might not want to touch, but to make the business case work, you've got to get out of the data center. And VMware is an awesome tool in the belt to be able to just move stuff over very, very quickly at low cost and essentially not change the way that you operate those applications. It gives you breathing room, essentially, to figure out what you want to modernize when, and might help you to make the business case for a migration to work. And I know, Tom, you're a bit of an expert in this area. Did you want to add anything to that?
I don't know whether I can, James. You covered that up very succinctly there. But yeah, just echoing James's thoughts. I mean, you know, the majority of applications that we see in enterprise enterprise environments tend to be systems of record. And so we'll go through the process of identifying with clients, you know, where the real value is in modernizing applications. And James mentioned sometimes what you don't want to do is you don't want to have dual data center running costs. So if you need to exit the data center quickly, VMware Cloud and AWS is an excellent, fantastic way to do it. You know, even to the sense in certain migrations, we don't need to re-IP. We can just extend networks out and get out very, very quickly. So we're big fans on it for customers who have a big compelling event, have hardware refreshes or the like, and need to move very, very swiftly.
Yeah, and the final point on the slide there is around Amazon Connect. And we see this as a great example of, I said at the beginning, the reason to transform is because you want to be able to do new things for your customers and sometimes for your employees as well. And Connect's a great example of that. It's not about Connect itself as a service, which is Amazon's basically call center in the cloud service. And there are a lot of services that wrap around that. But the idea with Connect is that you can rapidly transform your customer's experience interacting with your company, but also if you have a call center within your company, it makes it easier for you to transform the agent experience and makes it easier for them to service customers more efficiently. And even for customers that maybe have standardized on another cloud platform in terms of skills and they've already started to move workloads, if they want to transform their call center, Amazon Connect is a way to get to maybe dip your toe in the water with AWS, and we can help customers get started very quickly by focusing on the transformation of those experiences, by implementing Connect into an AWS landing zone, et cetera. And all of that can almost be delivered as a service. So it might be even if you have customers, if you're working for an organization that's standardized somewhere else, if they have a call center, they might still want to look at AWS for that. And it's a very valid initial migration use case.
We have a few minutes before we jump into the training and certification and all of that talk. Does there any questions from chat that you know that you want to further explore or anything like that you want to ask James, Tom, and Nitin? Now is the time to do it. Also, while I'm rambling about the cloud days that we're having in New Zealand and any other training related stuff, like if something comes to mind, just throw it in the chat and we can actually address it at that point. Is there any final thoughts, James, Tom, or Nitin, before I jump into my spiel?
No, that's it from me, and thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, much appreciated. If anybody has follow-on questions or if there's any way that we can help, reach out to us. You can find us at consegna.cloud or connect with us on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I'm just going to take over the screen for the time being. I want to just reiterate one other thing, which is this, which is AWS Cloud Days for .NET developers. If you know .NET and you want to also learn how to do .NET on AWS, this is a great start. It also is going to be in person in Auckland on the 26th of July, Christchurch on the 27th of July, and Wellington on the 28th of July. This is free, so if you are in any of those cities, please sign up and make appearance. This is going to be super fun. There's going to be a number of lectures, a number of presentations, and then followed by a workshop in the afternoon that is going to be supported by quite a few SAs, so solution architects from AWS. So that's also a good time to network and to talk to us and pick our brains on anything that you want to learn and know. This is going to be super exciting. My background is .NET and Microsoft Technologies. So yeah, it's always great to talk about it. Going on to a slightly different topic. So just bear with me while I reset up my screens to display the right slide. Let's swap those. Minimize that. Share, and we haven't got anything. Nick Little, nice to see you. I do need to catch up with you again when I'm down in Christchurch. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. Oh, that's not the one I want. And here we go. Boom. So these are all lovely QR codes. So to whoever, anyone out there that is wanting to upskill in AWS and or get certifications. So the very top one, AWS Skill Builder, is for you. So that allows you to choose a particular like job title that you're aiming for, or maybe an area of interest, like machine learning or data analytics and anything like that. And then that will build out a self-paced learning path, completely free. It's really, really good. I have done a couple courses from it myself as I was preparing for my exams, because I have to do certifications myself. Because, you know, apparently it's important for us to also have certifications so we can prove that we know what we're talking about. At the very bottom there, as I was talking about before, that is your 50% off discount exam vouchers. So these only work in Australia and New Zealand. So if you're outside of those two countries, unfortunately, I can't help you there. But it is a great, it makes it a lot more accessible. And also, if you are really sneaky, you go up to your manager and just, you know, prod them and be like, you should pay for the other half. And I love the time they give in, because upskilling and training the staff is a win-win for everyone involved. And on the far left, I know that I said that there is a self-paced option, but we all know that, you know, work gets in the way of that. You know, there's always work to do, even if you have like, you know, that 4 hours every like 2 weeks or something like that set aside. Everyone work always finds a way to like kind of eat up that time as you take priority. So the instructor-led training is a really, really good way. So you talk to your boss, or if you own a business or own a line of like IT, then definitely talk to your account manager or the training, AWS training side of the business. There should be a website for it. And yeah, just lock that in. The training for AWS instructor-led is amazing. I did it before I joined AWS. It is, you know, they do this day in, day out. So they're very, very good. They know how to explain in a way that, you know, it's easy to follow and you can understand the concepts. And as I mentioned before, it's a good way to enforce that, you know, you set aside 1 or 2 days for the whole entire team to get in a room and actually just, you know, just get on the same page and get up to speed. And the main reason that you also want to do that, if you maybe not already be attached to AWS, or you're just looking to upskill, is that literally everyone I talk to in New Zealand, all the customers, all the partners, like Consegna here, I'm sure they'll agree with me, are screaming out for cloud skills. Like they just can't find developers like quick enough, or they have the skills in cloud. So if you actually get those certificates that can prove you have, you know, the competencies to, you know, deliver results within the environment, they will pick you up left, right, and center. And if you're located overseas and listening to this, then definitely join the LinkedIn group AWS New Zealand Technical Community, and vet it, because we can actually see if we can hook you up and move you to this beautiful country. I'm not trying to poach anyone from overseas, but I'm just saying New Zealand's pretty great. James, do you want to show that Consegna is also hiring, and I'm not making all this stuff up?
No, it's you're definitely not making it up. We have a particular need for DevOps engineers today, and I think that I would say that in Australia and New Zealand, the job market's probably the best I've ever seen it right now. I know that AWS is also hiring. I was talking to some ISV partners this week that are hiring. So, the faster you can get trained, I think the more marketable you are. And if you're a DevOps engineer, please get in touch, especially if you want to live in beautiful New Zealand.
Exactly. Well, there goes our shameful plug for not only upskilling in AWS, but also moving to New Zealand. We can't say we're not doing our part. I kind of feel like, what was it that, the one where they showed it's a satire and it's like about them killing bugs. Can't remember it now. It's the one like where they're like, we need you. I'll come to me after this. Oh, Starship Troopers. That's the one. Starship Troopers.
Oh, yes.
Awesome show. But I think I've got slightly off topic. Thank you everyone for joining us. James, Tom, and Lytton, it has been an absolute pleasure hosting you today, and also you sharing your experiences on how to leverage the Migration Acceleration Program and all of your learnings to the wider community. So yeah, awesome. Nice to have you guys.
Thanks for having us, Casey.
Thanks so all for attending.
Yeah, cool. So everyone, enjoy your long weekend if you're in New Zealand. If you're in Australia, enjoy your Friday. Cool. Catch you.
Take care.
Take care.